Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. I wanted to say a couple things. Number one is that when we're looking at the situation that we're living in right now, the Prophet ﷺ had foretold us that there are signs of Judgment Day, in where part of the signs of Judgment Day is that people become more susceptible to fitna. But how do they become more susceptible to fitna? Is it that human beings change? Or is it that something else changes? Well, it's two things. Number one is that their behavior changed. But their behavior changing actually led to their vision changing, their knowledge about themselves, their knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their knowledge about their purpose that preceded their existence also becomes forgotten. Now that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us that the most important thing to keep and maintain such knowledge and that awareness about your purpose, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about yourself, can only be known through one method, which is al-wahy, which is through the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent through the revelation. Now, during our times, we could see that most people are going into universities, not I'm against it, but they're seeking knowledge to go to the universities, to get a job, in order to get the degree, to get the job. And certainly every single degree would basically give you a different opportunity. Well, the degrees that we're seeking in this dunya are basically in order for us to probably get some form of a stable job in this dunya. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that just as you would invest in this dunya in order to get some kind of a job in this dunya, and what are you really working towards? You're working towards getting a job. In other words, what you're really trying to do is that not necessarily get money, but you're trying to get yourself into getting a certain job, a certain effort that you're going to be investing in order for that to bring you money. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us that what really deserves the most effort that you would invest in is really Jannah. How to get to Jannah when all these different fitan, all these different misconceptions, all these different desires are surrounding us. But wait a minute, guess what? Women are more susceptible to fitna than men. Is that a misogynist interpretation? Is that a misogynist view? No. This is what even the hadith would explain, what they would even tell us in regards to our nature as women. But there are a number of different factors why, as women, we could be more susceptible to fitna. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that part of our nature actually makes us more susceptible to fitna, in where he said, I had seen most of you in hellfire. Why? Because تكثرن اللعن وتكفرن العشير. You have the tendency to see the world from a negative perspective, and that actually makes you want to damn different things around you, complain about everything. At the same time, تكفرن العشير. You also, in your social relations, would all of the time and most of the time actually only remember the pains that you might have went through. Now, here's what happens. When a person only remembers the pain and only the negative things, that actually makes them more susceptible to depression and probably losing hope. What do they end up doing? When you lose hope, you basically start feeling that there's no opportunity, therefore I don't need to invest and I don't need to put any effort. So the Prophet ﷺ, in that hadith, he was wanting to remind women that in order for you to get out of what is actually built within you, what is part of your nature, you need to redirect your focus. By redirecting your focus, you will be redirecting your opportunities. And this is one side of it. The second side to why many women become more susceptible to fitna is that oftentimes, perhaps the social dynamic that they're living in, which makes them get busy with other things. And when they're busy with other things, they basically either don't have enough time to invest in seeking ilm, or that they don't have at least the effort in where they're investing it in talab al-ilm, making them more prone to the different misconceptions that surround them. Now, even as a chaplain, or at least a former chaplain in St. Catherine University, and even worked in so many different universities in close relationships with different students, to be honest, I had found many women to be prone to a lot of fitna. Please don't misunderstand that this is a misogynist interpretation or misogynist view, because I'm a woman like you. And I certainly would not want to be portrayed as being more prone to fitna than men, because certainly that's going to make me seem, at least, that I'm not necessarily strong, I'm weak. This is not necessarily to call you or paint you with a brush to call you weak, but this is sometimes very important to know about a real part in something that is within your nature in order to prepare you better, in order for you to take the necessary precautions to make you stronger. When you know the realities of your own nature, exactly, and just like when we would know part of your genetics, it will help you by knowing your family history, your genetics, etc., to actually know in case when we would like to do some evaluation for what to expect within, of course, your health and your examination, we're basically looking for all the different things that we would know about your past or about your genetics in order to anticipate what to look for and to avoid any loss or at least any confusion within the diagnosis. That's exactly the same thing. That by knowing certain parts of your nature, that's basically not necessarily to call you names, to tell you that you're weaker, but that's in order to look at a certain lens of your past, a certain lens within your body, to do the scope within your body, within your nature, to help know what supplements, what supporting things, what diet, what, and the list goes on, what environment, all these different things in order to help you become healthier. But it's way easier talking about healthy in terms of body, but it's not that different when we're talking about healthy in terms of aqeedah. Because when we speak about healthy in terms of aqeedah, in terms of your identity, we're looking at pretty much the same thing. We're looking at your environment, we're looking at your mind, we're looking at your heart, we're looking at your spirit. These four different areas. We're looking at your environment, that's affecting your heart, that's affecting your mind, and certainly affecting your spirit. So all these different areas, whether it's your body, your heart, your mind, and even your spirit, all of these different things actually start with what your mind is actually producing, what your mind is envisioning, what your mind is basically getting these thoughts to help it redirect its focus, because by redirecting your focus, you're then going to be capable of redirecting your behavior. By redirecting your behavior, you're redirecting your heart. By redirecting your heart, that's when, with time, your heart will actually connect with your soul, and that creates your identity and who you are. Remember, who you are starts with what decisions you make. Then later, those decisions, with time, they become a habit. And over the further course of time, it becomes your character and who you are. But how can I preserve my identity as a Muslim woman? Well, that's where you look at these different ahadith and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us that what actually makes your identity is really to remember that in order to bring about a vision, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ. The first thing you want to know is know that there is no God worthy of worship but Allah, and seek forgiveness. What is that? And how is that related to anything? Well, that's in order to explain to us that the first thing you need to know in order to have your vision in place is really that not necessarily yourself. He didn't say, well, I want you to start by knowing yourself. No, he said, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. True knowledge starts with the knowledge that preceded your existence, the knowledge about Allah Almighty. With that knowledge about Allah Almighty, with that start, then you're going to be connecting yourself with the purpose that preceded your existence. Once you relate with what came before you and what came basically, what is coming after, in other words, what even brought you into existence, that's when you would recognize who you really are and why you're here. If you don't recognize who you really are and why you're here and why you were created, then you're going to find yourself roaming in different areas, confusing your path, confusing who you are, confusing your identity, confusing your future and your past, confusing all the different things that relate to you in your life. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically teaching us right there that in order to understand and to keep that vision in place and to keep that understanding in place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically teaching us right there that فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. What actually makes many and keeps many unaware of what they are and what they should be doing. What happens? It's basically their hearts are the ones. فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار. It's not the sight that goes blind, but it's actually the hearts that are in the chest that go blind. Go blind from where? Go blind from recognizing the reality of their existence, recognizing the reality of what purpose they were created for, going blind from recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, well, the real knowledge is, or the real awareness is the awareness when the person is aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the second they're aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the only time that they're going to be searching for what leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us that يتبعون إلا الظن. Most people would follow speculation. It would be presented as education, but in reality, it is nothing but speculation, different theories, or many different studies presented that it is the latest thing that man had discovered. Or they would go for the different things that lobbying is basically promoting. And then what is it presented at? It would be presented in a narrative that it's basically being inclusive, that it's basically being bringing in love, that it's basically, and the narratives are coming in and in, when in reality, in the core of that narrative is that it is basically just promoting one thing, which is hawa, which is whims, which is desires. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. Well, both those presented as studies or presented as the latest of what human intellect had basically come to discover, or whether it was presented that it was freedom, or it was love, or it was being inclusive, or it's tolerant of other people's choices, or whatever it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهِمُ الْهُدَىٰ. What the Lord Almighty had sent is guidance. Now that's a key word. That guidance, there is no way to get to that guidance if we basically lose that time and that investment to really take the moment and put in the effort. And with putting in the effort, we would basically come in to getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keep in mind, when you look at the different things around you, the farther you are, the smaller that thing becomes in your vision. The closer you are, the bigger it gets. And that's exactly the same thing. The closer you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when your vision and your understanding of Allahu Akbar becomes real. You recognize it. But the farther and the more distant you are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the smaller in your sight Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes, and the smaller in your sight Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes, the more susceptible you become to fitna. The more susceptible you become to not recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you would then exaggerate your own vision about yourself. You become an arrogant person. Why? Because you lost your vision from seeing Allah and you only started seeing yourself. And in the age of individualism, this is what's happening right now, where it's all about believe in yourself. In Islam, it's not believe in yourself, it's believe in Allah. It's all about Allahu Akbar, but there's no way that you're going to know what Allahu Akbar means unless you basically get through the ilm. To have the ilm, there's no way to basically say, well, I'm going to the university and I'm here getting a degree. You can have a PhD in physics and a PhD in biology or a medical degree, but not have any knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That person, in the lens of this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The only ones that would really fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are really the ones that have deep knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not talking about necessarily the knowledge about the different materialistic things around us, but we're actually talking about the knowledge of al-wahi. The knowledge of al-wahi is basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had even told the Prophet sallallahu وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, Ya Allah, increase me in ilm. How do I get that increase? How do I grow in that ilm? How do we get to there? Well, man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqqihhu fi din. If you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you, to bring you that enlightenment, well, you have to put the effort. You have to change the environment that you're sitting with, the environment that you're surrounding yourself with, the environment that you're spending time with. So what do I need to do? Well, change. Look at that time, and are you sitting down in a halaqah for Quran? Are you learning your tafsir? Are you learning your Quran? Are you learning your hadith? Are you learning your fiqh? What are you really learning? Are you putting in that investment? Why? Because if you don't put an investment, just recognize the farther you are, remember, the farther you are from recognizing and seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more distant you are, the less you basically start recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You start focusing on yourself. The closer you are, by having more ilm, the more awareness you would have, the bigger you would see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your heart. And that's where you would even look at yourself of actually being more aware and also being that person of recognition that who you are, what you are, and where you are on this whole map of life. Now, that's extremely important because the best blessing is basically the blessing of مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for them, He would give them the knowledge about the deen. The knowledge about the deen is actually giving you that awareness about yourself, and keep that reminder in where the Prophet ﷺ had actually made the dua, even for Abdullah ibn Abbas and even for Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that the most important thing is basically to have the knowledge. But there's no way unless you take the effort, you put in the effort to seek the ilm, you take in a lot of those different things that are keeping you from talab al-ilm, and you put that investment and replace it. Look at the amount of time you're spending with certain friends. Look at the amount of time you're spending on social media. Look at the amount of time, and then you're going to start deleting one after another. Why? Because there's no way to get a tahliya unless you invest in takhliya. What does that mean? There's no way that you can grow in your beautification and gaining unless you basically give up. It's a trade-off. There's no way that you can get both dunya and akhirah. That's why we would say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us, invest in siyam and give up on food in order to gain value. Give up on money in order to gain that area of a different value. In where? To get the akhirah, I want you to give up on dunya. To get the ilm, you need to give up on lots of time being lost in other things. Invest in talab al-ilm and see yourself getting closer to Allah. Invest in talab al-ilm and see yourself being more aware about yourself. Invest in talab al-ilm and you'll find yourself heading towards your purpose of life by using the map of guidance. By investing in talab al-ilm, you're going to even see your mental health going the right direction, because with talab al-ilm, it's basically going to correct your vision, change your behavior, and certainly going to bring about clarity in your heart. And you're going to see your heart gliding in peace. وصلهم على سيدنا محمد.